Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is, wherever in the world it is that you are. Welcome once more to another live stream of Alexandra Mayer's Live. And once more, we're going to continue on my page by page reading and commentary of the Bible. Today, we're going to go into Genesis 41. And where we left off on Genesis 40, we came across an instance of infidelity, or at least attempted infidelity, within the Bible when it comes to the story of Joseph and him working for a family, and he was very well regarded in that family, actually, a family within Egypt, and his master's wife attempting to get with him. I thought that was interesting, and Joseph didn't want to go that route. He tried to escape her. She wound up basically making a false accusation of rape against him. He was thrown into a prison, but God is with him, God is protecting him. And it's becoming more and more known that he has the gift of the ability to interpret dreams. So that's really where we are right now today, going into Genesis 41. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the reading. As I feel necessary, I will provide my commentary, and I hope all of you enjoy it. Pharaoh's Dreams. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh had a dream that he was standing by the Nile. 7 fine-looking and fattened cows suddenly came up out of the river, and they grazed in the meadow. Then 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and gaunt, and stood by the other cows on the river bank. The ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 fine-looking and fattened cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time. 7 ears of grain suddenly came up on one stalk, plump and good. Then 7 thin ears, scorched by the east wind, sprang up after them. The 7 thin ears devoured the 7 plump and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke and realized it was a dream. In the morning, his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, "Today I remember my offenses." Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in confinement in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we had a dream in the same night, and we, each of us, dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. A young Hebrew man was there with us, a servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. It happened just as he interpreted. He restored me to my position, and the baker was hanged. So Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothes, and came to Pharaoh. So finally, um, the person who was initially supposed to tell the Pharaoh about Joseph gets the nerve to tell him because it was probably to his benefit. The Pharaoh probably favored him after referring Joseph to him, but he could have said something a little earlier as Joseph had requested. But then again, it's biblical Egypt, each man for himself. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it." Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God, will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, I stood on the bank of the Nile, and suddenly there came up out of the river 7 cows, fattened and fine looking, and they grazed in the reeds. Then 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt. I have never seen such ugliness in all the land of Egypt. And the gaunt and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. And when they had eaten them up, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as before. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dreams 7 ears of grain, full and good, suddenly come up on one stalk. Then 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the thin ears swallowed the 7 good ears. So I told this to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 gaunt and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears scorched by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. It is as I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance will come throughout the land of Egypt. However, there will arise after them 7 years of famine. All the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will consume the land. The abundance will be unknown in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. The reason the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice is because the matter is established by God, and God will soon bring it to pass. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh seek out a man who is discerning and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officials over the land and collect the 5th part of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 abundant years. Let them gather all the food from those good years that come and lay up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. This food will be for a reserve for the land of for the 7 years of famine which will be in the land of Egypt, so that the land does not perish during the famine." Interesting. Now, without a doubt, I do feel that Joseph had the ability to interpret dreams. But I also think that Joseph may have had superior intellect to many of his peers, those around him, whether they were of a higher social status or not. Because you have to remember, Joseph did come from a lineage of very good genetics that were favored by God. He basically came from a lineage to where selective breeding was in place, truthfully. So you have to keep in mind you had a lot going on in those days to where you had some people who really were just not that educated. And Joseph, he was very observant of his surroundings. He'd been around his father's family, but then, when he was sold into slavery, he kind of lucked out, or maybe people just kind of knew who he was, and he ended up in a household that was a very prominent household. So again, he would have been exposed to the ways of politics, the ways of society at that time, and he was able to pick up on stuff. So, really, what Joseph did in this position as a dream interpreter was advise the Pharaoh as far as how to run that city or run that society. He actually was kind of a political advisor when you really look at it. And you have a lot of politics in the Bible. I'm telling you, the Bible is kind of a instruction book as just how humanity should work. But let's continue. Joseph rises to power. Oh, well, of course, he's smart. The counsel seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find anyone like this man in whom the Spirit of God?" And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You will be over my house, and according to your word, all my people, and all, and according to your word, all my people will be ruled. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." Woo! What in a what an interesting shift of events in Joseph's life. He went from being in the prison where, strangely, not strangely, but because he's favored by God, he was in charge of quite a few of the prisoners, and now he's gone into politics essentially, and he's in charge of Egypt. um, it's likely that the Pharaoh did know what happened when it came to why he was thrown into prison and whose home he presided over before. You know, again, the world is still a fairly small place at this stage, and people talk. So let's continue. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in clothes of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. Then he had him ride in the second chariot, which was his, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Also, don't forget that Joseph is a good looking guy. How do we know this? Because the wife of the head of the household where he presided in before was trying to get with him. That's why he ended up in prison in the first place. He was just too good looking. Oh, so the Bible's fun. All right, let's continue. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no man will lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath Paneath, and gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. In the 7 abundant years, the earth brought forth plentifully. So he gathered up all the food of the 7 years, which was in the land of Egypt, and laid the food in the cities. He put in every city the food of the fields which surrounded the city. Joseph gathered great quantities of grain, as the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, two, two sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, he said, has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, saying, "For God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." The 7 years of abundance that were in the land of Egypt ended. The 7 year famine began to come, just as Joseph had said. The famine was in all lands, but there was food in all the land of Egypt. When all the land of Egypt was hungry, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he says to you." Very, very interesting, because this situation would actually test the loyalty of many of the Egyptians, because you have to remember Joseph was Hebrew. He was of the slaves, the servants. So there were some people in Egypt who were probably looking at this situation who were like, now, wait a minute. We Egyptians have to answer to this Hebrew man? And the Pharaoh was like, yes, you do. Because if you don't, that means you are going against me. Interesting leadership tactic there. The famine was over all the face of the earth. So Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. Let me start that paragraph over. The famine was over all the face of the earth. So Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. Moreover, the countries came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was so severe in all the lands. All right, let's go into Genesis 42 now. So the famine has begun, but Joseph had foresight of it due to Pharaoh's dream, and he knew, hey, we got to save up some food, create reserves here. Now, another thing that I thought about is that even though the Egyptians were the dominant society, it appears at this stage, the farmers, the servants, the slaves had a tremendous amount of power over those people because they were the ones producing the food. So a famine could almost be manufactured by the people who create the reserves of food when you really think about it, who took care of the livestock, who were the farmers. It was possible if they'd had the presence of mind to do so, and if they had centralized leadership to do so. Was that going on in those times? Questionable. Questionable. So let's continue. Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. Genesis 42. Now, when Jacob saw there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he had said, "Perhaps some harm might happen to him." Thus the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. So Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. And remember, Joseph did see this, and he was kind of taunting his family with this vision that one day they would all come and bow to him. And that was part of why his brothers became so sick of him and sold him into slavery. But here we are in Genesis 42, and Joseph was right. Interesting. Joseph saw his brothers, and he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger to them and spoke harshly to them. He said to them, "From where do you come?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." Joseph knew his brothers, but they did not know him, so they didn't even recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. Yep, he said to them, "You are spies. You come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come only to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." They're not honest. They sold their own brother into slavery. Oh, it's so horrible. For 20 shekels. That was how much money they got for him. 20 shekels. Oh. Nothing's worse than betrayal in families. Really isn't. I don't think much hurts more than that. Let's continue. But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer living." Mm. Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. Here is how you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you will not leave here unless your younger brother comes here. Your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him get your brother, and he will be kept in prison, so that your words will be tested, whether there be any truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, you are surely spies." He put them all together in custody for 3 days. So Joseph is getting his revenge. That's what this is, okay? Joseph said to them the third day, "Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison house. The rest of you go and carry grain for the famine to your households. Nevertheless, bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "We are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the anguish of his fall when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us." So they're remembering what they did to Joseph. Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not speak to you, saying, 'Do not sin against the boy,' and you would not listen?" So the oldest brother, who was going to rescue him from the pit, is telling his other brothers, "Hey, see, I told you all this was going to happen, but you didn't listen to me. Therefore, his blood is now required of us." They did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. So Joseph is even speaking a different language at this point because he's been in Egypt for such a long time. Apparently, the Egyptians spoke a different language than the Hebrews who lived outside of Egypt in the land of Canaan. Interesting. He turned himself away from them and wept, but then turned back again and spoke with them. So Joseph is he's feeling, you know, he's remembering everything that happened. He's feeling emotional about it, but you know, he's hurt. Then he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Joseph then gave the command to fill their sacks with grain and to restore every man's money to his sack and to give them provisions for the way. And it was done for them. Joseph's brothers returned home. They loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. As one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed in the lodging place, he saw his money. It was in the mouth of the sack, and he said to his brothers, "My money has been returned. Here it is in my sack." Then their hearts sank, and they were afraid, saying to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" They came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan and told him all that had happened to them, saying, The Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us and took us for spies of the country. And we said to him, 'We are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, all sons of our father. One is no longer living, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan.' The Lord of the country, said to us, 'Here is how I may know you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine to your households and be gone.' but bring your youngest brother back to me. Then I will know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. Then I will deliver your brother to you, and you may trade in the land." As they emptied their sacks, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. So Joseph didn't even take their money. Interesting. When both when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Then Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me." Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Kill my two sons if I fail to bring him to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But Jacob said, "My son must not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should happen to him on the journey you are to make, then you will bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave." So Jacob is very afraid that he's going to lose more of his kids. Um, they still haven't really figured out that Joseph is the Lord of the land now. Interesting to me that the brothers didn't even recognize him, but who knows? So we're going to continue this tomorrow. We'll go into Genesis 43, Genesis 44, and Genesis 45. That will be our stopping point tomorrow. So this is getting interesting. It's getting very interesting when it comes to um, Joseph's situation, because he's been cursed, yet he's been blessed in many ways. He's had quite the adventure, from the situation with his brothers, to having to go into prison, to being elevated to authority over the city or the country where he lives, the territory, the land. And now he's finally getting to create closure in his life when it comes to how he was mistreated as a child, the childhood trauma, essentially, that he endured at the hand of his brothers. His life is coming full circle, which is a beautiful thing when I think about it. I like this particular Bible story because many of us in our lives go through childhood traumas, teen traumas, traumas even in our young adult years. And sometimes we don't get the chance to create closure in our lives or to face those demons from our past. Sometimes we're afraid to, even. But it's important that we do so, because when you don't, that's what creates fear within us, hate. That's what can create nightmares. You have to face your fears, your demons, things that hurt you in life. And you have to find inner closure and inner peace with whatever happened to you. Be it you just coming to peace or taking action against those who may have hurt you. Whatever it is that you have to do, you do have to do those things. Otherwise, you're haunted, metaphorically and possibly even physically. So everyone, take care. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening and joining me. If you have, if you're listening to this as an archive, as a recording, thank you for listening. And I'm going to go about my day now and have a wonderful, beautiful day. I hope that you do too. I'll talk to you all tomorrow, and we'll continue this tomorrow. Bye-bye.